I was wondering what it'd be like to inherit an empire. This is exactly what happened with Kublai Khan. He inherited the empire from his grandfather and his father. His grandfather was Genghis Khan, and he was a Mongol, not a Chinese person. He didn't even know the Chinese culture that well. But one thing he knew, and that was how to take over people, to conquer nations. Kublai Khan was good at this, almost as good as his grandfather, Genghis Khan. But yet something was kind of missing, He could have a summer palace and a winter palace, and he had everything that he needed. He had 10,000 soldiers guarding him, and anybody came to see him would have to take off their shoes and call him holy and bow down to him. He had anything. The luxury was beyond what we could ever imagine. Yet something was wrong, something was missing, and he kept wanting to take over more lands and more lands. But then he found something spiritual was missing in his life. Look at that little hole in his heart. All those things of the world didn't satisfy him. Well, Kublai Khan, from the Mongol Empire, he had taken over all the Islamic Muslim nations practically, part of the Byzantine Empire. He had land from the Yellow Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. He became the emperor of China and Mongolia. Huge amount, almost the whole world. And then he controlled the city that's now Beijing, this beautiful city. And he then fought more down southern because he wanted to control more land. So he fought the Chinese to control all of China, even though the Chinese had a lot of advanced weaponry compared to what he had. They had these poisonous fogs, bomb fogs that they'd throw in, and they had arsenic in them, and so they would kill a lot of people, just the smoke of it. They had this 5-league fog, which they made from gunpowder and wolf dung. They called it magic smoke, but it would be a choking cloud of smoke that they would fire in at their enemies. You'd think the Chinese would have won, but they didn't. The Mongolians still won. I think the Mongolian character was to conquer no matter what. Kublai marched into China, and he became the new total Chinese emperor in 1279, undisputed ruler. This Mongol dynasty was called the Yuan dynasty, Y-U-A-N. And like I said, it became a place of luxury and a mixing of the Chinese and the Mongolian cultures. Kublai Khan, though, was not just satisfied sitting there. He went on to conquer Korea, and then he sent a message to Japan that he was on his way to conquer Japan. So he had them build boats and ships, and had all these Mongolian soldiers come in. Of course, Mongolian soldiers, remember, they were from the Gobi Desert. They really didn't know much about fighting from ships, did they? They started off to Japan thinking, oh, this is going to be quite easy. What happens? They didn't even get very far, and this huge, huge storm, this typhoon comes and takes them all away. You almost lose all of the Mongolian fleet. 7 more years, Kublai Khan builds up a bigger army, tries to go in again. Almost the same thing happens. But the Japanese get out their ships. They're ready for war. They're going to defend their land against Kublai Khan. Guess what happens? Another wind, another storm comes in, taking away again Kublai Khan's ships. Mongolians end up in the sea. Japan again, they call it the kamikaze Kamikaze means the wind was fighting for them. Japan never did become part of the great Mongol Empire. Well, going back with Kublai Khan, because you see, he did do some good things. He did try to connect with the Chinese, and he did try to rule the Chinese fairly. He read the teachings of Confucius in law, and so he tried to make things equitable in ruling as trying to be a good king. He made major improvements on the Grand Canal, and he had a system that he put together on postal stations along the Silk Road, which was pretty unusual because he wanted to get mail and information back from the West, the rest of the world. And so these I call them Pony Express, but they were pony stops where they could get fresh horses and lodging and food. And he also built up the trade with these other countries. In fact, he had like dozens of countries that he started to trade with because, of course, China had a lot of things that the rest of the world had never heard of, that they wanted, the spices and thinking of the gold. They were very, very wealthy, but Kublai Khan now had this all. He encouraged traders with paper money, which was very unusual, but then they couldn't get robbed so much with getting robbed of their gold. He also organized trade association called ORTOGS, ORTOGS, and they were to help the caravans get across, and where one caravan could be attacked and that one person could lose everything. But if they had caravans where each of the merchants owned part of the caravan, then they wouldn't be out of all of their wealth. So he devised things like that. But he also was really interested in the spiritual realm. He wasn't really satisfied in studying all of the different religions of that day, from Muslim to Buddha to Hinduism to the Mongol religion was more like shamanism, the worship of witches and such, so it didn't really faze him, and he was really, really quite interested in what was in the West. What was it that he was interested in? He was interested in the gospel. He was interested in hearing of Christianity. He encouraged visitors from the West to come, and we know that 2 Italian men came, and later on, one Italian man named Marco Polo, and a whole book was written on Kublai Khan and the voyages of Marco Polo, and we'll talk about that later. But what he wrote when he sent out, he put it on a gold tablet and he sent it to the West. And what he was looking for was to really know what was the answer to life. What was the answer to all these religions? And so he wrote, "Send as many as 100 persons of our Christian faith, intelligent men acquainted with the 7 arts, well qualified to enter into controversy, and able clearly to prove by force the argument to idolaters and other kinds of folk that the law of Christ was best, and that all other religions were false and not, and that if they would prove this, he and all under him would become Christians. Finally, he charged his envoys to bring back some of the oil of the lamp which burns on the sepulchre of our Lord at Jerusalem." Sounds to me he was reading a little bit about Christianity. So we know that he sent for these friars, and they were sent out actually by the Pope, but they never did arrive. But who arrived? Marco Polo and his simple Christian faith. Do I think that Kublai Khan became a Christian? I don't know. But isn't it cool how God sends people to bring forth the gospel, and sometimes the least of the least? Can you imagine being sent to the Emperor of China, to the Emperor, the great Khan of the Mongols? to this man that had everything to share your simple faith? It'd be quite a deal, wouldn't it? Quite exciting. Later on, we find out about Marco Polo. And Marco Polo himself said that the adventures that he had around the world, especially in China, and especially in the palace of Kublai Khan, were very spectacular, physically and spiritually. Maybe we will see him in heaven, Kublai Khan. Who knows?